I want to welcome you to the Charly Crawford podcast. Let's ride.
Over $380,000 in lifetime earnings and 5 Open Futurity Championships. New One Time Blues has proven himself at the highest levels of competition, and now he's passing that greatness on. His foals are eligible for every major incentive program, giving you every opportunity to compete for the money that matters. Unmatched genetics, championship pedigree, foals with size built to win. New One Time Blues. This is what you breed for.
Jerold Camarillo, how are you, Mr. Papa Smurf?
I'm doing great. Just, enjoying the life that now I'm kind of retired. So just staying home and watching all you guys on the Cowboy Channel.
Yeah, that's how I keep up to date with everything myself. I have you talked about earlier you hadn't been able to go to the gold cards here lately. What happened?
Well, I had a kind of a accident where been roping for 70 some years, and finally it happened. I cut a finger off, and so took me a while to heal that up and got going again. I put a calf nipple on the end of that finger where I can have follow through and not lose my rope, and so then I started back.
Do you happen to have that? Is that nipple handy? Because I would love to see how you doctored your hand up so you could rope.
I don't know. Let me see here.
That would be classic.
Here it is right here, matter of fact. There it is. That nipple fits in there that you can see my finger where it's cut. And I put that calf nipple in there. You want me to get it out of this glove?
Well, I think we have a pretty good idea, but that's
So I put that calf nipple.
That's making things work right there. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about.
So then I put that in the glove, and then where I could never, I'd lose my rope and didn't have the follow through. So I come up with this nipple, and I tried everything. And finally a guy told me, says, well, what about a calf nipple? So I got that and went back to doing it. And then the second steer, when I roped live cattle, started to rope live cattle, and the second steer, my good heel horse just fell on me. And just tripped and fell over, broke 3 ribs, punctured my lung. And so I said, that's probably enough. I didn't want to wait for the third thing because, things happen in 3. So I said, so I just retired. And that's it. So now I sit over there in the arena and coach kids, and I have people that come over, and so I just have lessons here and still going on. I raised a lot of longhorns, so I got plenty of cattle they could rope. And then I was I have a few breakaway lessons, but the damn calves got so high that now I said, shoot, I can't afford those calves, because if you get Herefords or Angus cattle, you can't catch them. So you got to have, little, Holsteins or Jerseys, and those things are hard to keep alive. So then you buy a 4
hard to keep alive, and they got expensive too.
Yeah, you keep 4 or 5 of them, and then one dies, and now you down to 4, and it goes. So it's So when I says, well, let's wait till this price goes down, we'll go again.
Well, I've seen on the Cowboy Channel and social media, it looks like that you guys have been getting some rain out there. I've seen where Oakdale was muddy, looked like Red Bluff might have got some rain, and Clovis was dang sure muddy.
Yeah, it it seems like we was kind of in the dry part of the year there. We got a little rain in January, and usually we get our rain in February or March, and then April, as soon as the rodeo starts, here comes the rain. So yeah, it rains every year. And I think some of the better cowboys and the champions, they just quit coming here because they're roping the mud. So so very few of them. We used to get over 100 bulldoggers here, and used to get like 75, 80 calf ropers and 100 teams. But now it was when you get that many, I think there was 40 bulldoggers and 60 calf ropers and I think 80 teams or something like that. So it kind of bothers, but man, this town gets ready for it, and it doesn't matter. They had a crowd you couldn't even get in there Saturday. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I was curious too of doing this podcast if your office there at HBAR-B this morning was going to be able to function without you.
well, they'll be calling pretty quick. I got my phone on silent, but whenever I don't show up there, they say, where's he at? What happened now? Did he get hurt? Whatever. And now,
Well, when we were visiting, trying to get everything connected, I could hear the sirens in the background. I thought maybe they put out Jerold might be lost, so we got to get the sirens, get the cops, and make sure he's okay.
yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah, when I don't show up over there, they damn sure call.
Yeah, I seen where a lot of Californians did good out there at the big rodeos. I seen where Todd Hampton won Oakdale with Britt Ellerman, another second generation roper from Jay Ellerman, and then Junior Deese, he's kind of the man out there with that Landon Glenn, and then looked like yesterday Spencer Mitchell and Cody Cowden, Spank and Cowdog got the dub over there at Clovis yesterday on the Muleys.
Yeah, those muleys were bad. Speaking of Clovis, I guess some of the girls didn't want to rope those big cattle, so hell, they never even had it. They said, "Okay, well, we just won't have it." So that's kind of a bad deal. I don't know how that went, but that breakaway roping has really taken over.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's cool to see Spencer and Cody roping again too. They look just like they did when I was out there, and Cody just looks like a fine wine. He never looks any different than he ever does. Swing over his back, always in time, big loop, and
Yeah.
that's those guys right there. Seeing them get the win was not surprising at all.
Well, and Cody's a smart roper. He don't take a bad shot. You see, and so many of those kids, today that I watch on Cowboy Channel, I wrote with their dads, rodeo with their dads. But man, it is so fast out there anymore, Charlie. I mean, if they take one jump, that's too damn long. They're roping them on the corner, and there's kids that I don't even know. And I mean, back when we was, was just a few of us could rope 2 feet, and now all of them do it, and they do it faster.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's evolved so much. When you talk to about, used to roping with their dads and watching that, now we're seeing the next generation of, the Tryons, the Corkills, the Northcotts. You see at the U.S. finals where Jade won the Open, which is not surprising, but pretty cool to see where Jade and Kobe Corkill won the 6.5 or 16.5 roping together. Jade was heading for his son, and Kobe got the win. But then Kelton Corkill winning the 7.5 that weekend too, where he's kind of on his way up now. Where the Corkills knocked him in basically every way you can over there at the U.S. finals. It was pretty cool to see the next generation coming up. You're seeing Clay Tryon's boy, Tyler Tryon, just annihilate him over there at the BFI. Had a 13.5-second lead, I think, going in, where he just had to catch that last one, just basically like Seabiscuit, just hollering, "Stay on!" That's all he had to do to catch the last one. And that
and
Nicky
I thought,
Northcott's just a new generation of healers themselves.
yeah, Steve was over here with this boy last year, and talking to him and his boy, and he just driving his boy around, and man, that boy, I mean, he's awesome. He can do it.
Oh.
And then I talked to Clay Tryon on the phone, and I seen where they were last year at that George Aerosmith Open, the Mike Serbia Open, where they had to be just 6 on the last one to win it, and hell, they was 5-1 or 5-2, and I mean, there was, back in the day, you ran up there and made sure you roped him and handled him. And I told Clay, I says, God dang, he reached. I says, why would he do it on the last day? He says, does it every time, Jerold. That's the way he ropes. Drops 2 coils, round the horns. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, it's the youth and where they're taking team roping. It's I think I watched the other day somewhere in the first round, and somebody threw 3 coils and, was 5 on a long. I mean, it was a long score. It wasn't like horn around. Like it was stuck out there. 3
Yeah,
coils, 5-second run, middle of the arena, and you're like, that was round number 1.
yeah. I think that was
But they're
Caleb Drake.
controlled doing it too. I
Yeah,
mean, they have control of it. There's still horses still under control. They can still heal them, and it's
yeah,
It's amazing how fast and controlled they're staying now.
yeah. What about the 2-9 the other day?
Oh my gosh!
Huh? It was that,
Yeah, that's
and I tell you what, I watched that sucker in slow motion and see if it was a crossfire. I mean, it was. I mean, it was right on the money. And
it's fast.
2-9. What the hell?
So
What's it getting?
fast. And a guy knew sooner or later, if between Dustin and Squeeza, as fast as he can get it on, as tight as that head loop goes, somebody back there that's ready to fire. If the right steer and the right storm presents itself, we've been as sooner or later as it's bound to happen, and then there it was.
Yeah. And I remember years ago, my cousin Reg and I at Salt Lake in the 70s, we was 4 something over there. I think 4.6 or 4.9. And on the Wrangler jeans, where they put out those little tablets of, the cowboys and whatever. We had that record for years, and and you ask some of those young guys, yeah, we's 4.6, what 4.6? Shit, that's you might not even place for the 4.6 these days.
No,
No.
I know it.
Hi, I'm Trevor Brazil.
My name's Corey Kuntz.
Hi, I'm Gino Nogueira.
I'm Luke Brown.
Hi, I'm Tyler Wade.
I'm Caleb Driggers.
Miles Baker.
Wesley Thorpe. Paul Eves. Patrick Smith. We ask so much out of our horses that recovery is crucial, and that's why I use Equinety.
I've been doing this a long time. What I have in common with these ropers is we all trust Equinety.
I feed Equinety because I want to give my horses any edge. My horse.
My horse. My horse.
My horse.
All my horses have the Equinety edge.
Well, you guys were truly the trailblazers back then. When you think about the miles you guys traveled, the rodeos you guys went to, with you and your brother out there making names for yourselves. You guys were kind of the godfathers of being able to promote. I remember seeing so much on Leo with books on team roping. You guys roping together all the time. You guys were kind of that generation that got so much started where there's a lot of name branding going on with a lot of what you guys were doing. And I'd love to talk about, I know you won the world in 1969 in the team roping, but I'd love to talk about, coming from out there in California. It feels like Arizona, California, feels like back then that's where team roping originated from. Is that correct? Because I'd love to be able to kind of talk about that generation as you guys were coming up. What was it like out there? And talk a little bit also growing up, with Leo as your brother.
Well, back in them days, they had when you went to Arizona, you're tied down. Where it was team tying it called. So when you come out here to California, there was no team tying. So we kind of the old saying is that when you went across the border to Arizona, you left your dally team ropes there, and you had a set of tie down ropes, and you went to Arizona, and you use your tie down ropes, and you come across the border coming to California, you leave those tied ropes there, and you got your dally ropes. But it was back in them days, no cell phones. Had to call the rodeo office, and might not get in. You might have to stay by that pay phone for I don't know how long before you got in to enter the rodeo. So it was different.
Now, you guys from out west, was you around Oakdale? Where did you and Leo, where did you grow up?
We was raised in the San Ynez Valley, which is between Santa Barbara and Santa Maria. Nice little valley there, but there were that Solvang's kind of a Danish town, so there wasn't very many cowboys there. They had ranchers there and stuff, but we was kind of by ourselves there. And where we learned to rope, our dad was always worked on a ranch and stuff, but how we learned to rope, we never had an arena. He always had horses for us to ride, young horses and stuff. So being we never had a arena, we went out in the pastures, and even we roped other people's cattle. It was about 3 or 4 of us kids, and we round up a herd, and then 2 of us would chase this sucker and catch him. And of course, no horns. Had a rope around the neck because they were young steers or whatever. And we learned to rope those cattle out of the air because you roped in there were grass. That grass was high, and so you couldn't throw a trap. Back in them days, everybody trapped. And we come up with this deal where we roped those cattle where they were jumping so high out of that grass. That's the only way we can catch 2 feet. And we kind of took that to the arena. And when we got older, we went to these ropings. And most of the time we had to come from the San Ynez Valley to this area because there was no ropers down where we was raised. So it was about 5-6 hour trip, come over here. And when we introduced that roping in the arena, those older guys and everybody else says, what the hell are those kids doing? And, our ropes never hit the ground. We just roped them out of the air. And it was, so we kind of invented a deal where when we threw our loop, we had him caught. It wasn't wait till some of the steer gets in the loop. We had him caught when he jumped. We got him, and we didn't have to do it very fast because 2 feet in them days won. And so all I had to do is just follow the steer for 4 or 5 jumps, rope 2 feet, no big deal.
One thing I'd heard a lot of too was your dad instilled a lot of hard work ethic. Being out there ranching and stuff, and talk a little about you and Leo growing up and how you guys, from doctoring cattle or just roping cattle out in the pasture, whatever it was, to where you started evolving into the arena. Was there high school rodeos back then? Where did you kind of start going, or was it just mainly jackpots?
Well, like I said, in that country, there wasn't even a rodeo team. So we never even heard of a rodeo team. So high school rodeo in them days, it wasn't there. We usually came up here to junior rodeos in this country. And so when I graduated from high school, I spent so much time over here that I decided to move over here, and and we lived at the Live Oak Hotel for a couple of years, until we got things situated and I bought this place. But all the action was right here in the center. You could rope here every day but Monday. Cowboys in them days and still today me especially, I don't rope on Mondays. It's a Cowboys day off Monday, because you go to rodeos and rope on Saturday, Sunday, and you rope all week. Over here, there was a jackpot every night. And so Monday, you got to rest your horses and rest yourself. So we just called it a Cowboy Day Monday. That was Cowboy Day off.
Well, that must have carried over because that was my dad. I remember we jackpotted all weekend, and we always said Mondays were off. We don't rope on Mondays. So
Yep.
that sounds about right. I remember that.
And talking the new generation, now my nephews, when my brother passed away, they came over here and stayed with me for every summer. And they'd come here and they'd go to those roping Saturday and Sunday, and they come up Monday. I'd go to the office, have my coffee, come back, and they're saddled up. And they said, I said, what are you guys doing? Or we're going to rope. I said, today's Monday. No roping on Monday. Rest those horses. We want to rope.
Yeah.
And I mean, what the hell? I mean, they just want to rope every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why they get so dang good so fast, isn't it? It's wild.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then we never had nowadays they got videos, they got sleds, where you can kind of learn or get an idea, put in the video, watch those guys team rope and no, we never had that. We had a dummy steer out in the yard, and that twirled around. That was my dad's invention. And hell, there was days there we supposed to ride horses, and we just roped that dummy all day long. And he'd come home from work and he says, "Did you guys ride those horses?" "Oh yeah." He'd go out there and check them. There wasn't no sweat marks on them. So you didn't ride these horses, you know. I said, "Yeah, we'll ride them tomorrow." So anyway, we come up with an idea that we roped all day long, and then in the evening before we got home, we went and got a bucket of water and put on those couple of horses' backs. And then when you put water, on a horse, they go out there and roll. And so he got dirty. And so my dad come home from work and he went and checked those horses. He said, "Well, that's where I like to see these horses, sweat marks on them." There was a bucket of water poured on their backs. And we got away with that till he found out.
Got away with it till you didn't.
Yeah. And another story is that, he, like I say, he had these horses for us to ride. And he was going to go to a branding. And he says, "Hey," says, "which one of these horses, I can take to this branding?" And there's a neat little horse here my brother and I was healing on out there in the pastures. And he took him to the branding. And he came back for dinner, that night. And he says, "Man," he says, "we need to kind of maybe buy this horse. This sucker is a natural." He says, "Man," he put his head down and, man, he says, backed up and come in there with his ears down and roped those calves in the corral. And we all looked at each other. That horse probably had 500 head on roped in the pasture. So, we never did tell him any different. But he said, that was kind of a funny story.
We'll talk a little bit about when you guys started getting like arenas and things like that. Because you talked about, roping cattle out in the pasture. I'm sure probably plenty of brandings you went to. It seemed like some of the best healers I remembered growing up, a lot of them playmaking abilities, a lot of them ranched a lot. You think of Bobby Harris and Matt Zancanella. And, I know every time we go out west, Doe Lockett, Brent Lockett and Kyle Lockett, as much as they be in the Brandon pin, I think there's so much too, when a guy's reading unpredictable cattle, learning how, to be able to read those shots, when the calves are running, the different angles, when they're hopping, when they're just standing still, there's so much, I think, too, what you guys learned ranching and branding cattle. Then when you started going from that to being able to create an arena and being able to start roping and practicing to start getting ready for jackpots.
Yeah, our dad took us to a few of those brandings. We never had an arena at our house. And, we always had to go somewhere. And I remember there was an arena kind of like, maybe 2 miles from our house. And we would lead like 4 horses over there right after school and rope at this guy's place. And then, come home dark, leading those 4 or 5 horses back. And that's kind of like, where we started in the arenas. But most of the time it was easy for us and didn't have to worry about school because, we, it was a hassle to go to school because we missed roping. So part of the time, I didn't even go to school half the time. Hell, I love horses to go rope. Hell of school. But yeah, it was, and back in them days, to read cattle and stuff, we never went to arenas till, and traveling that way till we got older. And I think my brother was like 16 and we came up here to roping here. And I think it was somewhere in Fresno. And we came back home and the truck quit on us about 5 miles from the house, from the ranch. And so, well, what are we going to do? Well, we just unloaded them horses and rode them on in. And we got to the house about midnight. Dad said, "What the hell happened?" "Well, we broke down and rode our horses in, Dad. What are we going to do? So next day we had to go get that truck, get it fixed. But we rode them on in. Real cowboys.
Real cowboys. Talk a little bit about, you talked a little bit about team time. That's something that's kind of a lost art now, and not as much you kind of heard about it. I remember my dad showed me the knot, when I was a young kid, but to this day, I have not seen it. And that back then that was pretty popular, especially like you said in Arizona, correct? Talk a
Oh,
little about
right.
team tying and kind of what that event was like and how did it work?
Well, it's kind of like steer roping, where the horse, when you get off the horse, he keeps pulling, and then when you holler woe to him, he stops. Well, in team tying, the guy would jump off his horse about the time he would, he kind of had confidence that he was going to catch the steer. But then back in them days, it was those guys in Arizona. They didn't have much timing. They come in there and they turn that corner. They just threw down there. If they wrote 1 foot, 2 feet's fine. But when we learned to do that, which everybody says, well, these boys we're gonna show them a different story when they come down to Arizona. It says they ain't gonna kick our butts like they did out there. So, well, we had a ring. We bought some Holsteins and we trained ourselves how to come in there and take an extra jump and rope 2 feet, and then flip them over one time, where the header runs straight from his horse right straight to the steer, and slid in there and didn't have to gather the other foot, because you had to have 2 feet where you could have the square knot. Well, we made it where our headers didn't have to worry about that 1 foot. Most of the time we roped 2 feet, we flipped him over one time, he comes, slid in there, tied the knot.
Because if
So,
I remembered right, the header's tied on, heeler's tied on. So the
yeah,
header ropes, knees tied on, heeler ropes 2 feet, header jumps off, ties the 2 back feet, and that's the time, correct?
right, right. And if you didn't have 2 feet, you had to put that other foot up there, which took time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we just,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
And
could see
like
how
us,
that was, back in the day, doctoring cattle. I could see how that with 2 guys, that could be how a lot of guys doctored cattle back today.
oh yeah, that's what they did. And we was, when the pastures, we had to do the same thing. We had, the horses we had to, when you got off, you tied it, it was tied to the horn, and you went down there and docked him, and that horse was trained to stay there and keep the rope tight, and you could do whatever you had, even cut little bull calves. And so
Yeah.
it was pretty good.
Yeah, I have a military branding. We do a lot with the military, and we have a military first responders. They come out here, and we'll take 12 of them that's got PTSD, never been on a horse before, and we'll take them out. And 7 a.m. we're mounted, watching the sun come up, out gathering cattle, and just showing them what it was like back then. Being able the romance of being able to be horseback, and no cell phones, and just being able to be out there in the pasture as you're bringing the cows in, sorting the cows off the calves, and doctoring, vaccinating, and dragging the calves. And in that time we're explaining to them how the Western industry was created. In order to be on this horse right here, first you had to ride him. So where our bronc riding came from was, we're going to need transportation. We're going to need something we can ride to go out there and gather cattle and doctor them. So bronc riding was initiated by trying to get the horse to where we had something to ride. Then you can see where the cutting, where the cow horse came in, with cutting everything off as you're bringing everything in. Then you can see where heading and heeling came from as your 2 guys out doctoring cattle out in the pasture. You can see where calf roping showed up when, you were the only one out there doctoring them. You can see where steer wrestling came in during the brandings, as someone's throwing them over and, legging them down. And I said, and the only thing I can think of on the bull riding was when the branding was over with and everyone had too much to drink and there was still some bulls left in the pen. Somebody had to have somewhere said, hey, let's ride one. So that's
Oh,
probably, in my opinion, probably where the bull riding showed up.
yeah. But Charlie, you speaking of that, of course, when we was kids, we always, was ranching and gathering cattle and branding cattle. But, at that point in our lives, we really didn't think, that that was important. We kind of said, oh shoot, another Brandon, whatever, gathering cattle and stuff. But later in our lives, we that there taught us how to read the cattle, what he's going to do, and kind of make a plan. Where you could set this steer up where he wouldn't go left, wouldn't go right, and then that's when we brought it here in the later years, where everybody, back in the day, the header comes from the left and the heeler comes from the right, and the header run toward the steer, and here he was cutting you off on the fence where you couldn't get shot. But the deal was where the header had all the time in the world to rope the steer, and then when he turned him off, you had the whole wide of the arena to try to heel him. Well, when my brother and I start coming over here, and when the roping was getting faster, well, then we learned to where he would just break left out of the box, and that the healer, I would move the steer towards him, or my brother would move the steer towards me. And now we're in the middle. And we invented another deal where, nowadays that's where it is. And nowadays that healer's got to haze that steer, because most of those headers' horses wouldn't go right because they're ready to duck off. So that was another deal. And,
Yeah, talking about kind of the art of being able to keep things as a healer right there. So much of an art to be able to put that steer where you're wanting them. It's one thing to be able to heel 2 feet, but then there's also setting the run up, sets up the header, sets up your corner, sets up your position.
yeah,
You guys were those guys creating that kind of that style and that art of it.
yeah. And then not dropping that coal anymore, and taking that coal up in your hand so you get that steer on a short rope. And, so the healer, we've always said, that when you're a header, you kind of write the check. But the healer, if you give him the right shot, he's going to sign that check. And that's kind of like, you explain, I'll write the check, but the healer's the one that signs it. And the header's the quarterback, tries to set that up. So,
Love it.
I mean,
We'll talk about you and Leo when you guys graduate high school. Been jackpot team roping, I'm guessing. And then when you guys got your card, when you guys started going to the rodeos, what made you guys, as you guys were progressing, wanting now to start going to rodeos?
well, we came when we graduated from school. We came out here and went to a lot of jackpots and amateur rodeos, and it got where, like I said, the way we learned to rope those cattle in them days, that they couldn't beat us. And so we started going to amateur rodeos, and we'd work the jackpots during the week, went to the amateur rodeos, and they got where we couldn't go to the amateur rodeos anymore because they wouldn't compete with us. So then they start dodging us. And it was a really good thing. I went to roping here, and all of us did, particular jackpot over here, and we beat them every time. Every Tuesday and Thursday night they have roping, 2 4-steer averages. Well, we win all 4 go-rounds, all the places in the average. And finally they barred us. They said, well, you guys can't come. So I think I was 15 years old and had a lawsuit, which tried to prevent us. I had that arena shut down because they wouldn't let us 4 guys go rope. So that was just another story. And so then they started making a deal where if you won over 5,000, you couldn't rope. That's the way they put it. Then it was 10,000, which we couldn't go because, and then when we got in the PRCA, they says, no PRCA guys. The top 10 couldn't go. Well, we was the, top 4 or 5 guys all the time. So we couldn't go. So now it kind of, we was involved where we couldn't make our jackpot money anymore, which was a lot of money for us when we was kids. And
What
so,
year was this? Do you remember? Do you
oh,
remember
it
kind of
was,
the year?
yeah, 67, 68, and because, see, we joined in 68. So it was 66, 65, 60. I graduated 65. So 66, 67, it was all in them. So then we kind of had to join the PRCA because they wouldn't let us rope no more around here. So that's when we joined.
So when you guys got your card, the PRCA card, talk about some of the rodeos you're going to. Talk about some of the guys that when you were getting to the rodeos, who were the guys? Who were the guys to beat? Talk a little about that environment and that culture back then.
Well, when we joined, it was it was Jimmy Rodriguez, Gene Rambo, Ted Ashworth, Sammy Edmondson, Harold Mattis, Les Hurties, and then we had to try to get those guys roping every weekend. We battle them out, and then we started going to make 2-3 rodeos where they just made one. Back in that days, if you made one, it was a weekend, whatever. Well, we did it for the money, so we was working 2-3 rodeos where they would just work one. And so when that happened, then we started flying the rodeos where we can make more and get more and get more, try to make more money. And
Talk
that
about
year,
where some of those rodeos were. Were they in California? What cities and what towns were you guys going
oh
to?
shoot, it was all over these little towns. They had so many rodeos. There's one every weekend here somewhere. And, from San Jose to Bakersfield, you name it, they had a rodeo. And but we didn't really. I got this idea when we was in amateurs. There was this bareback rider and bull rider. He worked two benches, and he had a plane. He got a plane, and that gave me an idea later in my life. I said, you know what? We need to get to more rodeos. So let's have somebody drive our outfit over here to this rodeo, and we'll fly over here in 2-3 rodeos and come back and get on our horses, and and then that started where we started flying around. And when we started that, it was in the late 80s late 80s or whatever. And I always had I had kind of a deal with Roy Cooper. When we was flying to those rodeos, we had a little Cessna. Well, he had another plane too, and then where I got into a twin engine flying around, and so then I was always one step ahead of him. And back in the back in the 80s, Roy, he says, "I got you now, Daryl. I got me what they call that? It was a prop jet." And so back in them days, I got a Learjet. God damn, we come flying over Prescott, and they said, "God dang it!" It says, "Look at who's that?" And that Roy says, "That's that damn Jerold." He had him. He had him a prop jet. I had a Learjet. God dang, it was so funny. Oh, and those guys would be hauling ass, trying to get, to another rodeo. Like I remember from Prescott, you had to go to Pecos, and boy, those guys would fight from those little planes. They'd fight those clouds, and they got to the rodeo. We'd already showered and looked pretty clean. Those guys come in that rodeo van. They was rough looking. God dang it. Oh, they couldn't believe it.
Well, talk a little bit about, in the late 60s when you and Leo started going to the rodeos. Who were you roping with? Where was the NFR at? Talk a little about, kind of what it was like as you were, getting your card and now making the NFR, and then where it was also at.
Well, I started with John Miller. He went to we was down there in that valley. John Miller was going to Cal Poly, and we go to those ropings on Friday nights over there, and he kind of picked me up because he roped pretty good, and he started kind of hauling me around, which, I was still young, not able to drive. And we used to start going to those jackpots with him. And then when I joined at 68, he was my partner. I rode with him in 68 and 69. And Leo started riding with a kid named Billy Wilson, which he was raised down there in Atascadero, down south. And we was kind of grew up together roping at those ropings. And then Reg came along. He had to go to the Army. He's the only guy that went to the Army out of all of us. And then when he got out of the Army, we kind of drafted him to rope, and so it was just three of us. And then we got a guy that we saw roping. His name was Jack Rascal, and he came in the '60s here before we joined, and he was a badass header. Man, he had a nice horse, and he was our partner between. So there was actually my brother, my cousin Reg, and then this guy Jack Rasco. And then, of course, when we joined, Leo, my brother, he worked 3 events. I just worked cap rope and team rope. I bulldogged for a little bit, but he worked 3 events. And so he went to all those rodeos, and most of them rodeos, back in the Northwest, and they never had team roping. It was just, that wasn't what they didn't. What as I say, they didn't have to have it until they made it a rule where they had to have team roping. So he would go off road. He's trying to win the rookie, which he should have won. But that year in '68, I was a runner-up, and then the next year I won my first World's Championship. But
you and John Miller won the world in '69, correct?
Well,
you won it, but you were roping with John Miller, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then where was the NFR back then? Was that Oklahoma City?
Oklahoma City. Yeah. Is that
because that was when we talk a lot about team roping history. This is what's so fun about having these podcasts, being able to talk about that, because it's wild for so many people that didn't understand. Back then, only if you didn't have the same amount of money then only one person won the world in the team roping.
Right.
And so when you had more money won than who you're roping with, you were the world champion, and there was no header healer world champion like there is today.
Right. Yeah. And them days, when we went to Oklahoma City, you had to rope 5 tie down steers and 5 team rope dally. So there was, you team tied 5 and you dallied 5. And that was the old time.
That was the NFR?
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that was the NFR.
You team tied and then team roped?
Yeah. You had to rope 5 team tied steers every other night. You tied one and then you dallied one the next night.
Oh, man, that's fascinating.
Yeah, because the Arizona guys thought we had, because there's more rodeos over here in California. And so there was only you had Scottsdale, Tucson, Phoenix, and they were all tied ropings, and Yuma. And so they figured, well, those guys, could win more money than us than we could team tie. And so they said, I don't know why can't we team tie 5 steers and give us a chance? So, I mean, it's a politic deal, but anyway, that's what it was for a couple of years until
a couple of years it was.
Yeah. And then until they rope one around the front leg or something. Anyway, they tore this leg off the steer. So all the people then that they kind of outlawed that deal. So
when did it just go to straight team roping then? Do you remember kind of what year that was?
I think it was I know 68 and 69 I believe was Dally, and then after that I think it was a couple of years it was team tied. You rope, team tied steers 5 and Dally 5. And I think they had that for a couple of years is all.
Years. Well, talk about, because Leo was your older brother. Was that correct? You were the
Yeah, yeah. He
younger
was a
brother.
year and a half older than me.
So talk about when you guys first go out there and you win the world before Leo does. You get the world title in '69. Talk a little about maybe some of the rivalry then. Was there any rivalry, between the younger brother beating the older brother, or did that wake Leo up where then he started roping better? How did that dynamic work?
Well, like I said, he in '68, he was more like working 3 events where I'm losing you here. Are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, it was getting kind of blurry. But anyway, he like I said, he was in the Bulldog and in calf roping because he was going for the all around and rookie and stuff. And so I just more or less team rope. And then and then he did that for 68, 69, and then 70, 71, 72. Well, he started, you know, more team roping, and then they started having team roping everywhere. And so then he was 3-time world champion after that.
Do you remember when team roping became mandatory? Do you remember?
Oh man, it was the early '70s, I think, or no, it was. I tell you what, they had to have team roping at St. Paul, Oregon, in '77. I think was their first year because I told that guy his name was Gene Smith. I remember right. When I went over there in '76, I stopped in there. I was done roadie, and I stopped in there and watched the last performance. And that Gene Smith, I told him, I says, listen, you're going to have team roping next year here. He says, yeah. I says, well, I'm going to come over here next year. I'm going to win the all around. And he looked at me and said, yeah, right. So anyway, I went over there and I won the all around that year, '77, where, they had to have team roping. And boy, he says, God dang it, you told me you was going to do that. I said, yeah, I told you. Team roping. Yeah, you got to have team roping. But
We'll talk a little bit about what it was like rodeoing back then in the PRCA when, you think about team roping really not being an event. Of all things that you could think of back then, if you've got two guys with two ropes, doctoring cattle, I mean, it's wild to me what took so long getting team roping to be an event in rodeo.
well, I think I think they had didn't want to haul any steers and have team roping. You got two guys, so they had to bring steers instead of just bringing calves. They had to have more steers, and they had to all these. Now they got team roping. You got two guys. They had to have more pins, and I think it was just kind of a headache for the stock contractor to do that. But on the other hand, they added more money to the rodeo if they put in this other event. And I don't really know the facts about all that stuff, but they made that team roping mandatory, I think, in the like '76, '77. I'm thinking.
Yeah. Because I've seen after you had won the world in '69, then John Miller won the world a couple times in a row, '70, '71, and then that's when it looked like Leo started, in '72, '73, '75, and then I think him and T won it again in '83, or maybe just him. It looked like he won it again in '83. So,
Yeah.
4-time world champion. What you guys were doing, the dynasty. I heard so much about you and Reg. Also, Reg was a cousin. That Camarillo name back then it was a household name that everybody talked about in team roping. It seemed like the team roping was starting to grow. Your guys were part of the growth to it. And talk a little about, when that started kind of picking up. You say you're hearing about mandatory team roping now. The rodeos are getting better. What was it that made the change where all of a sudden was it the fact the growth of the sport, the event? What do you feel like it was that when you guys were starting to kind of make that move as your name brand, what was changing in team roping, from the late '60s into the '70s?
Well, I just think, team roping is kind of a family deal, and I think more guys wanted to get involved in rodeo, but they couldn't steer right, so they couldn't broke calves, because you got the younger generation coming. And I think they said, shoot, they wanted to rodeo. And so they says, they wanted a team rope. So then they started, talking to the committee guys and stuff and, trying to get this other event in. And I think that's where it started.
Yeah.
2006.
What about the jackpots at this time? Because that's what I remember so much about California, hearing about so many of those prestigious jackpots between the Chowchilla, between the BFI, kind of where it moved around and bounced around a little bit here and there, the Oakdale 10 steer. There was a lot of very prestigious jackpots back in the day coming from California.
They had Riverside in January. They had Chowchilla in March, and they had Oakdale 10 steer in September, and then they had Las Vegas in November. Those are the major rodeos. And Riverside was 10 steer, Chowchilla was the 8 steer, Oakdale was a 10 steer, Las Vegas was a 10 steer. And then before even the BFI came around, they had those major ropings. And I can remember when my dad came and competed here at Oakdale in 1954. They had that 10 steer. And I was like 7 years old. And it pouring down rain. And but they had like 200 and some teams. And it was like a 3-day event. They roped like 2 on Friday and 4 on Saturday, and then they finished up on Sunday. And I can remember when I got old enough when they still had this roping here at Oakdale. I can remember roping a steer on a Friday and then waiting 3 hours before I get another one. And they had like 200 and something teams, and it was major. They had a Calcutta where business guys and stuff would take a chance buying a team for maybe back in the days 200-300, and paying $1,000 for my brother to rope with Reg or whoever he was roping with, and then I started roping with H.P. Evans, which was he started that reaching deal and stuff, and I can remember his dad was the auctioneer, and I remember in them days, I think he paid like $1,800 for me and HP to, try to win at Oakdale, and I think we won second, but man, you talk about they had barbecue, and it was a fun deal, but 3 days of roping here, and now they have it all in one day, and they got the number system going, and it wasn't as much fun. And we rope big cattle, fresh cattle, weigh 600-700 pounds, and you had to go down there and make you a run. It wasn't no ducking or anything, so it was a different setup.
This episode is brought to you by BC Insurance of Texas, an agency that's built on family values and deep roots in agriculture. Brandon and his team of agents don't just insure the farm and ranch lifestyle, they live it. That firsthand experience is what drives BC Insurance to do things differently. They don't believe in simply selling policies. Instead, they take the time to build insurance programs that eliminate gaps in coverage and truly protect the land, livestock, equine operations, and assets you've worked a lifetime to build. As an independent agency, BC Insurance partners with top-rated carriers so they can tailor coverage to fit your operation, not force you into a one-size-fits-all plan. Their focus is simple: relationships first, protection second, and peace of mind always. If you're looking for insurance from people who understand your world, visit bcinsurancetx.com and connect with BC Insurance today.
Well, you talked about HP. Talk a little about HP because, man, that guy put the cool and cool, in team roping. We see Sid Rock, Sid Steiner in the steer wrestling, kind of what he's done. We see where Rocker Steiner, is kind of the face now for that rebel, in our industry now. But man, HP was like Fonzie, man. That guy was he put the cool and cool, man. Talk a little bit about kind of what, that guy's presence and kind of what that did in team roping a little bit back then.
Well, that, we seen him. We was at a jackpot down there in Bakersfield, and this kid, HV, was heading for a guy named Dick Pasco, and he was also heading for his dad. And he was coming across that line, and man, he was dropping a couple of coils, and I mean, spinning these steers. And Leo and I looked at each other. He says, "Hey, we need to get that guy to head for us." And so we got him to start roping with us. And I'm telling you what, Charlie, he changed the whole game. I mean, if you had a good steer, you win first. If you had a medium steer, you win first. And if you had a running steer, you might win first. Because I healed for him, and there was a lot of times when, I started out hazing the steer, so he was, a little bit behind me. And most of the time, you're kind of even up when the header gets up there. You're even with him, and you can kind of see on the corner of his eye, your header. HP once in a while when they has a running steer, I seen his loop go by me, and I says, "Oh shit!" But I mean, and like I'm saying, he made a bad steer. You went day money on. He was that good, and like you said, he was cool. He didn't care.
It was cool.
We entered him, and he'd just come up here. We'd go together, and get on those planes, and it was just it's a different guy. He did, he just wasn't afraid to do it, and didn't care. And that one time he was in the plane with us, and we got to this rodeo, and of course, guys wanted to trade, so they knew they couldn't get by a trade with my brother and I. So they went to HP, and they says, "Hey, says you want to trade?" Whoa. Said, "No, you're talking to the wrong guys. You got to go talk to those two guys." He says, "I just turned the steers. That's all I do." He says, God, it was so funny.
Yeah, that guy he was a rock star in a way, from what I'd heard. You were there, so you knew more about him than I did, but heard dated Tanya Tucker, which was, one of the famous country singers back then. And
Yeah.
I think I remember, hearing, fur coats and glasses and just cool, man. Cool as cool could be. And I remember hearing a story about him one time. I think maybe it's Salinas. I thought I heard where, like, I think Tommy Flanagan, has the rope tricks, does one of the king of the rope tricks from back then. And HP was walking by, and Tommy looked at HP and goes, Hey, HP, can you do this? And I think he threw 3 coils straight up in the air, flipped it around, and got 2 horns right there on the dummy, because he's so good with the rope and all the rope tricks. And they said HP just kept on walking, never even missed a beat, and just looked at him and goes, Tommy tricks you for kids, and just kept on walking. They said just as cool as could be, man. I was like, golly, like, that's all I heard, man. That guy was a cool cat.
Oh yeah, he was amazing. And God dang it. Last year my wife and I went, when he got inducted, we went over there to Hall of Fame with him, in Oklahoma. And he just still the same. He now he ropes with Leo's boy. Now it's those World Series and stuff. And they won a big one the other day. Well, HB's boy, George. Him and Trey, just like you said, here we go. New breed, new era. So it's kind of fun to watch those guys.
Yeah, I'll bet. We'll talk a little about the culture back then, because I've heard so much about you and Leo, back then. And, when you guys kind of had that edge, Leo had that edge. Talk a little about where that competitor drive came from. When you're talking about Leo and you guys kind of learning a business out of rodeoing back then, taking it seriously, starting to practice more and Talk a little bit what that culture was like rodeoing back in the 70s and 80s.
Well, since we was kids, it was all about him and I trying to beat, each other. But on the other part of it is we helped each other, to do things different and better. And we brought that to where we got older and started, the hazing and the shorter rope and roping the steers. Back in the day when you had a big loop heeling and when you roped the steer, you kind of dropped that coil and then you brought your slack all the way up. And, and then when the steer hit it, you came down. And that was all old fashioned. And now we invented where you could have more when you headed and heeled. If you got that rope and got this hand turned over and pulled slack up instead of back with your thumb up, we got to where we roped the head of the steers and got that slack up, took that coil and got it up again, and then got it that steer on short rope, and then the healer would come in there and rope that steer without dropping any coils, rope that steer and where it wasn't very far from you, and got that rope and you pulled the slack from the feet. See, you didn't wait for the steer to pull it. You pulled that slack, and then when you got that slack, you dallied. And here you got short ropes on both sides, and you could go down the arena halfway. And, back in the day when you was 9, you'd be 6 or 7 down there. And so then it got shorter. So, I mean, it was him and I always would try to improve our roping. And if he seen something that I was doing, or how'd you do that, or vice versa, we would always help each other. With our horses.
Yeah, you guys were finding those little ways to shave time off, because when you're
Right.
talking about taking slack out a little bit faster, those are little things that add up to where, your times are getting shorter than the competition.
And I think, Charlie, that that our later lives, that when we was beginning some of the gold cards I'm talking about now, we changed, and those other guys would not change. Didn't change, but we learned to change on the level of where we kept going up, where we could be competitive, and we did that right here in the practice pit. So it was, to our advantage to try to, be quicker.
Yeah. We'll talk a little about the ropes back then, because when you're talking about 650, 700-pound steers, you're talking big old racks, you're talking big wide legs. Talk a little about the ropes and also kind of what the lays were, because I would imagine it's a lot different than, now 400, 450-pound steers, pretty common. To see a 600-pound steer these days, that's rare. And so, where guys are, using extra soft and softer ropes and softer lays on the heel side, what were the ropes back then? What were the lays? Because there is a different advantage when you're talking about horn size and width of what the legs are for what you had to try to make sure you caught back then.
Well, everybody used 7/16 ropes. The 3/8 ropes was never even heard of. And so you use this big 7/16 rope. And you needed that kind of rope when you team tie, because a little rope like that might break, which, even the 7/16 I have seen where the ropes broke too hard of a jerk. But in them days, you used the 7/16, and then these lighter ropes came in, and they changed, and I was probably the last person to get out of a 7/16 rope. My brother, when those 3/8 ropes came by, and I mean, he was on it. And but I was probably the last person to use a 7/16 rope. And now I use a 3/8, GT4s, or that other rope they got out now, I use a 3/8 medium soft. And some of those healers, today, I mean, God, they rope with some hard ropes. I can't believe it. But 3/8 extra soft for me, and I mean the extra soft head rope and a medium soft heel rope.
We'll
And
talk about a little bit too is when, from the 60s, 70s, 80s on up to the 90s, you've roped through all these eras and stuff. Talk a little bit how the rope started updating and when they started getting better and when you started seeing like the difference in ropes. Because I remember T. Woolman, when I had him on the podcast, he was talking about you might be able to use one rope all summer, and that's wild to think, because I mean nowadays it's hard to get, sometimes a rope to go all the way through a jackpot.
yeah, 5-6 steers nowadays. I used to. My brother, he just loved it. He'd take a new rope and use it. I couldn't do that. I had to rope at least 2-3 steers with it. Where it felt better to me. But he would drag a brand new rope and get after it. But the other day, we was cleaning out the tack room and stuff, and I seen this old rope can in there and opened it up. And here's my tied ropes and a dolly rope. And there were 7. I couldn't even hardly swing the suckers. God, it was funny. I mean, I said, this is what everybody used back in the day. And when we started, we got into, we went to Sheridan, Wyoming, and then Bobby King over there, he picked me up to sponsor me with ropes and stuff, and I did with him for a few years, and then the Classic came, and of course, we knew Billy since we was kids, and so she picked up my brother and I, and we'd been Classic ever since that. And shoot, even the day when I was roping here a few years back, I called down there and ordered some ropes, and I guess it was this new girl on the phone. And I'd always, I didn't take advantage of the deal. I'd wait for maybe a month or so, and then order 12 ropes. Heel ropes, 6 head ropes, 6 heel ropes, and some gloves and stuff. And so I talked to this one lady, and she was working down there, and I ordered 12 ropes, and she says, well, your contract says you can only get 2 a month or whatever. And I said, well, just talk to Billy, And so she called me back in about 10 minutes. Says, how many of those ropes you want? I guess she talked to Billy. Billy says, hey, you give that guy whatever he wants. And she's been on our team for a long time. Good gal.
Yeah. 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 That's one thing about Classic, they know what it's like. They run a business and a great business, but you talk about a sponsorship that understands what the cowboy goes through because when you're on with Classic, when you make the NFR, there's a bonus for making the NFR.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times my bonus checks beat me home from when I went to my last rodeo of the season and made the NFR. And then by the time I get home, my bonus check was already sitting there.
Yeah.
Those are little things like that people understand. Hey, these guys probably need that money as soon as they're done with the season. Those are little things like that you take in consideration of what the Cowboys go through all year, going here and there. And, there's
Yeah.
some that you may not get it till the next year. And you're like, I need it in between the NFR and kind of the end of the year a lot of times. And so those are
Yeah.
little things those guys take in consideration.
Oh, yeah. And we went to the NFR, and then Billy gave us a deal of bonus deals now because we went from there to gold card ropings and the senior pro rodeos. And so she gave us bonus for them deals. And like you said, hell time we got home, our bonus checks was there. They were always good for us.
Yeah.
Charlie,
Yeah.
it's
Yes,
Liz.
ma'am.
Hi,
Liz.
Hi. When we were talking about, remember on the phone, we talked, back in the day, you probably already know this stuff from talking to so many people, but when we go to Oklahoma City, there was no sponsorships, but we thought it was a big deal when one year McDonald's picked us up and paid the entry fees, which were $100.
So there was fees back in the day to enter the NFR.
It was $100.
Yeah.
And they would, we thought that was a big deal when it was they paid for that, because when we started, we went to the old arena, the fairgrounds, and then it moved to the Myriad, or how it's pronounced,
Yeah.
underneath. You didn't have to go outside. And then when they gave us companion passes in the old building. Ours were up in the top row. But when you know how Oklahoma weather is, it's 70 degrees when you go in and snowing when you come out. So we were grateful for those seats up in the rafters because it was warmer up there. So it evolved for us from, no sponsorship. You pay your own fees, and then to getting our $100 at McDonald's was pretty cool. And then when we got to Las Vegas, they sponsored our rooms. So
yeah, because you're going through the evolution. I remember when T. Woolman talked about it, because he was like, we roped for a living. There was no sponsorships. We bought our own ropes. We bought our own hay. We bought our own feed. We bought our own trucks, trailers, everything, and then if you didn't win, there was no gas getting put in the gas tank. There was no fees getting paid. There was no sponsors. I think even there for the longest time, I don't know, till you would know better than I would, is when they even allowed to have a logo on your shirt at a PRCA rodeo.
Yep.
Yeah, we thought it was a big deal when we went to Vegas. They paid for our room. Or even prior to that, when we would go to Vegas, Buddy Spock, he ran the Stardust. Oh, we thought we were a big deal when we got a free room comp there. Yeah, T was right. When you didn't win, it was a little rough.
Yeah, because that's what's so cool about the trail that you guys blazed, for these young kids roping right now, hearing those stories, hearing what it was like, blazing that trail to get team roping to where it's at now. You guys were those guys.
Yeah. And back in them days too, Charlie, is, when we had our wives, and we had, I'm going to say we had like 3 outfits on the road, and our wives would, and like I said, in them days, there were no cell phones. So when we fly into a rodeo and my wife would be there with the horses, I would give her a list of where I was going to be in the next 3-4 days. And sometimes she would be waiting at these airports with the middle of nowhere, right? And she'd be there in the middle of the night and wondering if we was going to make it or not, because like I said, there's no phones. And then all of a sudden she'd see that plane come in, and then I'd have her list to have these horses at a certain place, a couple of days. And then the other outfit would be back in Texas or Wyoming or someplace, and pick up that outfit. Same way with him, have this guy. And with this guy we had, in fact, we was one of the first guys that had a slant 4-horse trailer, gooseneck, and a dually truck. And we gave this kid credit card, all them horses, gave him a place to go, a couple of places to go, and then we'd land, give him another shot, he'd take it. And nobody else did that. And that way we could make more rodeos, and so we get to the finals and maybe win a championship.
My new online course, The Basics of Horsemanship for Roping, is now available. This course takes everything we've covered from the basics of roping and puts it into action. You'll learn how to properly use your left hand and feet to create clear cues for your horse and making sure your tack fits your horse correctly. There will be detailed live run breakdowns and real jackpot scenarios. Head over to charlycrawford.training, click under the course tab, and sign up today. If you haven't picked up the basics of roping yet, check out the Basics Bundle. You'll save 20% and get both courses to help take your roping and your horsemanship to the next level.
So it
We'll
was
talk
pretty
about
cool.
when you send someone to a rodeo. You know, you're not punching in maps on your phone and giving them a list and an address. So
No.
talk about how you would help guys get to a rodeo, because I remember back in my day when, you know, the Rand McNally map, you know, I remember rodeoing with Cross and my dad and stuff. And before you started the truck, you would write down the turns, you know, so you didn't have to always just look at the map. I'm like, so everyone had different strategies of how you got to the, you know, looking at the map, getting the roads down, knowing when the turns are. So when you're helping some of these guys drive for you and find fairgrounds and all these places, how did you guys help them guys be able to find going from one rodeo to the next?
Well, sometimes we didn't, you know, some of the places, you know, we've never been there. So we didn't kind of, this is all right. You take this road, you know, here it is on the map. You go right here and you turn right here at this town. And, you know, and a lot of them guys, they says, what do you mean turn right? Yeah, I said, there'll be a feed store or a gas station right there. You turn right. And so it was difficult sometimes, but you did have to have
Well, and
that.
also I would say a little bit easier in one perspective is because when you probably got to a rodeo and you found a feed store or you found, say, a gas station, they probably know where the rodeo was at. Because I remember that was a little bit of a deal too. When we get to some of the smaller towns, get to a rodeo, if we didn't know where it was at, you could find someone that knew, oh, yes, you know, go to the next road over here, hang a right, then hang a left. But like now, I don't think anyone would know where a rodeo is now because, you know, everything's just so located on your phone.
Yeah, and it's so crowded now. You know, back in the day, it wasn't. You know, we go to towns where there's over 1,000 people, and now now there's 10, 20,000 at that same town.
Yeah.
So you were lost. You know, but you know, like you said, you know that map. You had to have that map in the truck. I mean, there wasn't no GT or whatever you want to call it on the phone. And oh, there's my dog. But yeah, it was amazing, you know, because you know, like I said again, there was no cell phones, and you know, you had to find a payphone, and sometimes you stopped at those payphones where the sucker didn't work. You had to go to another town, and you had so much time to enter, and so you know, there you was driving to town looking for a phone. So
Talk a little bit about the rigs you guys used back then, you know, the 454s. Talk a little about, you know, the gas trucks to the diesel trucks, and then also how many rodeos, you know, for a lot of those years, how many rodeos a year were you guys going to?
well, I when I won the world championships, I think I went to 140 rodeos. But you know, and I don't even know. I think it was in the 80s when I did that. But then they put a stop to it because I went to too many rodeos. Then they limited it to 100, I think, and now I think it's only like 75, isn't it?
Mhm.
But they never had no limit. And so I remember that one year, my best year was 77, and I think that's when I went to all them rodeos. But 77 was my best year, where, you know, how they have that cowboy Christmas deal. I was lucky enough to be that guy that year to win the most money the 4th of July. And again, to where money is now, my first World Championship for the whole year, Charlie, in '69, I won 11,000. 11,000, I think 600 or something for a world champion. And now they get, that's not even a half, they get 30,000 for a day money at the finals. And I win 11,000 for the whole damn year. But
What was
back
a
in
new
them
truck
days,
back then? Can you remember?
huh? What was what?
How much was a new truck back then? Can you remember?
3,000. I
Mm.
bought a trailer, that gooseneck trailer and a dually truck, and it cost me eight. I think it cost me 8,000. And so that year and that truck, you know, I mean, you know, you got 8 miles a gallon. If you didn't pull the trailer, you got 8 miles a gallon if you pulled one. It didn't matter. 454, like you're saying. And back when I started, it was a car and a 2-horse trailer. And I roped calves. Most every place I went, I roped calves and team rope. So I had to have a horse that was a nice heel horse and a good calf horse. So all my heel horses, I could rope calves on, because 2-horse trailer and your header had to have his horse. So if I want to work another event, it's either borrow a horse or train my horse to work 2 events. And you had a car and you had
because
a
that was the Cadillac and 2-horse. That was a rig back in the day. Or I remember hearing about, Cadillac and 2-horse trailer.
Yeah, and that's all you had. And then
I never thought about the fact you only got a 2-horse trailer. So if you want to do 2 events, that heel horse better do 2 events. And if you want your header to go with you, that's your other stall. That's
that's
an
it.
interesting. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, so just like Trevor Brazil, he came to the house here in the early 2000s, and I think the year he won the first all-around championship. Anyway, he came here to Oakdale, stayed here at the house, and he was healing, and he come and we was roping here, brother and I and stuff, and he roped about 3-4 steers on his horse, and he said, I said, you had enough? He says, yeah, I don't want to rope too many horse. And I said, well, get on that little horse over there and heel on him. He says, is that your calf horse? I said, yeah. He's a really good heel horse too. And so he gets on that my little horse and he heels on that little horse. Says, God damn, he says, that's better than my heel horse. He says, is this your calf horse? I said, yeah. And I roped a couple calves on him. I said, yeah. He goes down and roped a couple calves on him. He says, hey, can I rope the practice calf here at Oakdale Rodeo, the extra? I says, yeah, go ahead. So he ropes that extra calf. This horse jerked that calf so hard that he got fined, right? And then he comes and buys the horse for me for $20,000. In them days, that was a lot of damn money, right? That horse goes on, Charlie, to win the Horse of the Year and wins his first all-around championship. That horse won over $500,000. That horse, him, Trevor, and
what was that horse's name?
Well, I called him 2 names, but he called him. What was that horse? I mean, what's 2 names? What did he call that horse? God dang it! I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, yeah.
Because I thought I remembered kind of a similar story when he bought Doofus, I think, from Cody Cowden. And then I think that one turned into a calf horse as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the horse he brought here when he was roping on. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. But
I can't remember either.
Name? I'll think of his name here in a minute. But yeah.
Well, talk about some of the stories. Talk about some of the stories you guys had from back in the day. Because I remember some of the amount of rodeos you guys got to back in the day. And, talk a little about, once the rodeo was over with, where everybody went. You talked about some of the guys, there from 80s, 90s, when the guy was done roping, like the beer tent, go drink beers, hang out with your buddies and stuff. But, in this era right here, kind of what was some of the amount of rodeos you go to in a day? What was some of the things that after the rodeo where guys went to? And talk a little about what it was like, kind of in that era with some of the stories you guys had.
Well, there's, I was probably the only guy, I don't know how many guys have done it today, but I made 5 rodeos in one day. And I started at Greeley, and I roped on. My wife had my horses at Greeley. My brother had the horses at Cody and Red Lodge. I borrowed a horse at Lander. So I went to Greeley in the morning slack. Then I flew to Cody and worked that one. Went to Red Lodge, worked that one. And then I flew into Lander and worked that one, and then worked Livingston after the rodeo. 5 in one day. And did it. I did it 3 times. And, different.
Holy smokes. That wasn't a one and done. You did it 3 times.
I did it 3 times, yeah. and it was amazing. And people
Planes,
that
trains, and automobiles on that.
yeah, and they said, "Well, how'd you get your horses?" I said, "Well," I said, "my brother had his horses at Cody Red Lodge because they could, drive between that." So hell, I rode my horse at Greeley. I rode my brother's horse at Cody and Red Lodge and Livingston, and I just had to borrow a horse at Lander.
I remember one year Leo came and stayed at the house when I was a young kid, and I lived in Canby, and so when the St. Paul Rodeo came to town, a lot of the guys would come over, and
You lived in
they'd
Canada?
rope. My dad had an arena, and we had some cattle, and guys would come rope, keep their horses fly in and out, and we'd get to take care of the horses and stuff. But when we would cook dinner and just hear stories, oh my gosh, like that's what hooked me to rodeoing, was
Yeah.
just the adventure you guys had. I mean, it was like, why would anyone want a job like this? This sounds like just the coolest thing ever in the world. Just the places you went, the stories you did, the 5 rodeos, how do you get this horse from here to there, the planes you jumped on, the rigs, the hitchhiking, just the amount of things. When I grew up, everyone talked about work and they couldn't stand it. You guys
Yeah.
show up and I mean, it's an adventure. Like it was all you could do to get me to go to school. I just wanted to go rodeo because you guys, I mean, just the wild adventure stories you guys had back then. It was amazing.
Yeah, we had some good stories. My wife and I got my wife a little pet rabbit, little cottontail, and God dang it, we hauled that little rabbit on. His name was Easter, and we hauled him around everywhere. God, even when I was wrong with HP and that rabbit, I tell you what, he had that rabbit. He was, they're nocturnal, and HP is too. You give the will to HP at dark, he would drive that rig till daylight. So him and that rabbit would be in the front seat driving that rig down that car. Me, oh my God, that was fun.
Rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. I haven't heard of a rabbit for a traveling partner.
Oh yeah. Oh man, all the ropers that we come into the rodeo and we put put him in the shade of the back. And had to make sure the sun where he had shade. And Ricky Green and all the T words come back. How's Easter? He's right. He hears his name that Easter would come out of the back of that truck, look and see who was talking. He was a cool dude. HP loved him.
Well, then once you guys kind of get done rodeoing, I remember when I was coming out there, seeing you guys with the gold cards a lot. They started having gold card rodeo ropings and rodeos and stuff like that at all your rodeos out west. Seemed like Red Bluff had them, Oakdale. I thought I remembered Clovis. I know Salinas was one of the fun ones too, where they had
Yeah.
gold cards, and that's when I seen you and Leo just still just dominating. Looked like you went to heading for a lot of
Yeah.
those, and then Leo was still healing at him.
Yeah. Yeah. That one year, Leo, he when his first gold card, you had to be 50. You had to be 50 to enter the gold card. Or no, maybe it was 55. You had to be 55 or 50, one or the other, to enter the gold card at Salinas. Well, that year, Leo was 50. I wasn't 50 yet, so he wrote with somebody else. But he wrote with one of the Grantham boys, Levi Grantham, I think it was. And he rode Jack Roddy's horse, and he won the rodeo, the PRCA rodeo, right? And so when they took the interview with him, that guy says, "Well, how's you won the gold card?" And Leo said, "Whoa! I didn't win the gold card. I won the big deal." The guy says, "What?" He says, "Yeah, I won the big deal." It was funny that guy was taking the news there. He was talking to Leo. That was funny. He said, "Well, wait a minute. I didn't win the gold card." He said, "Yeah, I won the big one."
We'll talk a little bit about too, because I remember, when we go to Oakdale, that was when slack was over with. All the team ropers went to the sandwich shop. Was it called Farinessi's? Is that what was the sandwich shop there in Oakdale? What's it called? Feressi's?
Yeah, Feressi's. Yeah, they had my brother's sandwich there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd all go there. We'd all order the Leo.
Yeah, yeah. They still have it, and they still have the 7th, and it's still there, and they still order them. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, Oakdale back in the day, that was the Stephenville, Texas of now. That talk a little about
Yeah,
Oakdale. I mean, that was for the longest time the cowboy capital of the world.
yeah, it still is. Charlie, it still is. Not them. Everybody moved to Stephenville because it's too high a tax here in California. So then they called out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. But yeah, that's where a lot of them were at. You talk so much about team roping, coming from that area in Oakdale being one of the places where, that was where you found where all the team ropings were, the team ropers, and it was one of the hubs.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of a central deal here, and then when they got through with those spring rodeos in March, they would all the cowboys come here and hang out at most of them would be at the Live Oak Hotel or whatever. They'd stick around here. And of course, some of those riders and even some of the time event guys, they didn't have a very good spring, so they were looking for work. So that's where the ranchers around here would pick up those cowboys and take them to do, they'd have to have the horse for them and stuff. But a lot of those cowboys did day work here before Oakdale and between Oakdale and Red Bluff. They'd be here for those couple of weeks. And then Clovis too, that's another week. And they'd get all their damn cattle shipped and everything and use some of those cowboys for, I think them days, I think it was $20 or $15 a day. And now it's $200. You believe that? I would just, and then I got the, Ace Berry, I don't know if you heard of him or anything, but he's the only guy that won the bareback riding in the team roping at the finals that year. I think it was 72 or 3 or something. But he comes over here and he helps me feed cattle and horses every morning. He comes here for something to do at 7 o'clock every morning. So
That's pretty cool. We'll talk a little bit now about what you're doing now, because that's one of the things I've heard, helping so many kids, and, you got a bunch of kids there at the ranch and helping them with the roping. What's some of the stuff that you do out there? Do you have to have signs so they know where to go? How is it with all the kids you got rambling, kind of scrambling around there nowadays?
well, now like, they got cell phones now, but I've taught most of the kids and, that I helped here with their, calf roping and team roping and breakaway roping. And now they all kind of went off, and now you see them on TV once in a while, and you say, wow, I taught that kid how to rope 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and hell, now, if you rope with them, that's the guys you got to be, it's the kids you taught how to rope. But I remember when I retired from rodeoing in 86, I hung around here and just went to the bigger ones, 87, 88. And then in the early 90s, I had some kids gathering my steers over here. There was about 3 or 4 of them, their parents' kids their parents came and roped. And I told those kids, go over there and get around those cattle, bring them in. Well, hell, I had more fun watching those kids. They had cattle going everywhere, and it kind of gave me an idea. So I says, man, I tell you what, I said, I'm going to have me, a camp where I bring those kids in here. And of course, the wife was egging on me, what are you going to do? You're going to get a job? What? I said, job doing what? Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything but rope. So anyway, I started having these Camp Geralds where every Tuesday and Thursday I'd have kids for the whole day, charge them $50. I'd feed them lunch. And first time I had it, man, everybody want to do it, right? I had probably 25 kids here. And so I didn't know how I was going to, but they all showed up and got them all fed and everything. And then they were still here when she come home from work, and she says, what the hell? And I said, well, you wanted me to do something. I said, here you go. I got it. And then I started having junior rodeos, Camp Jerold junior rodeos, and had the first one right here at Oakdale. And I didn't know how big this was going to be either. But the first time I had it, I had 880 entries. And I had that rodeo one day, and I went over there and checked it out. And before I started, I went to a few junior rodeos around here and see how they was run and how they'd go all night, finish it, sometimes the next day. And I says, well, here's what I'm going to do. The track at Oakdale, right? That track where everybody stands. They got the arena next to it. I built another arena right there. And I had them work that whole track up. And I run the goat tying and the pole mating over on that side. And all the kids' events over there. Had the main arena here. Started that sucker at 8 o'clock and had the barrel racers first so they could get the hell out of my way. And oh man, it was a fun deal. God, it had 26 events. 880.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, it was,
Wow.
man, you talk about a time. Holy smoke. And I was done, started at 8, and I told everybody I'd be done by 5, and they said, no way. But they thought I was just going to use that arena. And nobody thought about this idea. I said, what's this track doing here? What? I'd use it. I could use this track. So anyway, so then now, after that, everybody started to use 2 arenas. Nobody thought about using 2 arenas.
No.
I got by it, and I had fun for Charlie for what, how many years? A couple of years? 3 years?
I don't know, but tell Charlie about how when you and Reg and Leo would rope on the weekends and go to the rodeos, and then starting like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you guys were pretty instrumental in starting clinics.
Yeah.
Like they would have huge clinics. You'd have 40 guys at a clinic. So, those are the kind of stories he wants to hear, how that, when you progressed and you started winning your championships, you could rodeo on the weekends, go to 3 to 5 rodeos. You would fly to all over the United States and Canada. You 3 would have a 3-day roping clinic, big clinics. And then we'd meet you at the rodeo, and that would be pretty much our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seemed like you guys were the first to start the clinics.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1970. Matter of fact, Sturgis, South Dakota was our first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then.
That's good.
Oh, who's that? That's a tractor going by. But yeah. And then we had one here, and we had 60 people here. And I had a truckload of
For
steers.
3 days?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Had them 3 days.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And Reg and I and Leo put it on. And I'm telling you what, when I was roping calves, I heard a lot of calves. And my mom and dad lived next door here. And so I had all this veal, because my mom butchered. So I had all this veal in there, and we had a big barbecue after the first day of the school and stuff. Oh man, it was good times. But we let's see, what was that guy's name from Texas? And he invented a horse on a platform with a steer. It is they call it the stick after Leo's horse. I'm trying to think of that
Stick?
guy. Yeah, slick stick. And we cut that thing in half, and we had all that in the trailer, in the gooseneck trailer, and then 2 horses behind that. We had a divider, and we'd go and we'd line up schools from Idaho, Utah, Montana, where we always rodeoing. PRCA, we had rodeos on the weekends, and then we started school Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we just unload that stick, unload a horse, unload that stick, have a school, 3 days, go to the rodeos on weekends, and then we line up another school we'd go to. Leo and I did that for
That was later years.
Yeah, that was later years. We did that.
That was after Reg quit.
Yeah, after Reg quit. But we did that for a while. And that was kind of fun. Got to go different places.
Well, because that was supplementing a lot of income. When we talk about nowadays, guys having fuel sponsors, having fee sponsors, having rope sponsors, saddle sponsors, you name it. Some of the top guys, they make money, just they have probably more money left over sometimes after expenses, nowadays, as opposed to back then, man. There had to be something else done. There wasn't sponsorships, there was some winning, but then to try to supplement some other income in those days you're talking about, that's when I thought when you guys started them clinics was kind of where you started to learn the business behind rodeo and to be able to do stuff outside of the, rodeo and to be able to supplement enough income to stay going.
Yeah, and that money you got from those schools and stuff, and you because we did, we was lucky enough to do good at the rodeo. They keep our money together. But those clinics we had, we didn't put that away. And when we come back home, man, we had some money in our pockets. But that's what kept us.
Because I remember it seemed like guys talked about, kind of having stats, then you're qualified to do clinics. Because I remember, I think maybe it was Al or Walt, I forget which one, but somebody was talking about, well, I won the world now. Now I've got enough stats to be able to do clinics. That was kind of a prerequisite. It seemed like, when guys talked about it back then. And then I remember when I started making the NFR, that's what I thought too, was like, well, I probably won't be able to do a clinic until I probably make the NFR till I have stats. And now you look at it now, I don't know if hardly any guys, I think T-Wade and Thorpe, but, most of the guys now, you don't even see them doing clinics. Like the top guys now with the futurities, the jackpots, the rodeos, keeping up with sponsors, social media. Now there's so much more other business now behind rodeo, and where, I don't think but those two guys that I know of at the top level that even do clinics.
Yeah, there's very few now. But, Charlie, they got videos now and stuff. You want to watch some, you want to watch one of those top heaters, hell, they got a video out. You just plug in that video and it's like, it's on YouTube or whatever they call it now and stuff. And hell, they can learn the rope right off the video.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right off their phone outside at the dummy or in their barn. Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
There you are. Yeah. But
we'll talk about a little bit of the lessons. You said you still do quite a few lessons there at home, there in California.
Yeah, it's private lessons now. Once in a while, they'll fly me to somewhere to, teach. Usually it's like maybe these people have their kids, a couple of kids that want to learn how to rope or something. They'll fly me over there for a couple of days, 3 days, but most of the time here, it's private lessons. And now it's right now, this time of year they go to school, but they got about another 3 weeks of school, and then they'll be coming in. But it looks like the baby booms got down. Years ago when I was telling you about the Camp Darrells here, there was 25, 30 kids that I had here, and probably 15 of them, that really wanted to do it and went on. But nowadays I don't know what happened to them. But, it's too, they want a team rope, and it's too hard to run down their own flying calves. I don't want to do that. A team rope. But back in the day, you did everything. You rope calves, you bulldog, you steer rope, you team rope. Myself, that's what I did, and you did it because that was your job. And nowadays, it don't seem like you want to get out there and, they want to get up at noon and, start the day.
Not the real cowboy.
And the real cowboys,
over half the day's already over.
Yeah, half the day, I'm ready to come in. But I don't know.
Well, Jerold, I appreciate you coming on, man. I really enjoyed it. Man, it's an honor having you on the podcast, and it's legendary what you guys did back then.
Well, I'm an honor. It's an honor for me to be on it and talk to you. And because some of the stories, they they're forgotten.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, there's so many stories. You think about back then, there was no social media, when you hear about something entertaining, there's no cowboy channel that can do an interview and it's done. And there's no, none of that stuff that was able, if you weren't there or in that group, those stories never got heard unless you were amongst that area or that small group that was out there going to the rodeos.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, what about, have you done Jackie on your podcast?
Yeah, I've had Jackie on. Yeah.
Well, there's a legend yourself. You guys have, look at what she's like a trailblazer like the team ropers were. Even
there's
even
so
more
much
struggles.
similarities to what the team
Yeah.
ropers had to go through with what the breakaway ropers are having to do right now, for sure.
Yeah. So that's pretty amazing. It's fun for us since we're grateful to have the Cowboy Channel so that we can watch them and we can keep up to speed with what's going on. But how amazing for you and how proud of her you must be to break away from where it was to where it is now.
Yeah, she's done an amazing job, with what she's done with a rope in her hand. She's so articulate with being able to, she speaks well, she presents herself well, she's professional, she's done a great job for what the sport's where it's going. And, and I think unfortunately she hit a roadblock. I think she got it to where it's at now. And, now is that roadblock of, whenever Vegas or the NFR is going to be able to put them in the NFR, no one knows now from there, but, when you watch what the team roping had to go through the 80s with the money being added, a lot of the rodeos didn't have team roping, then as it slowly started to evolve, I mean, it seemed like it took forever in the team roping just to get into Houston, then to even get equal money in the team roping, then to have a header and healer world champion, it took so long in the team roping. Guys fought so much to get it where it's at now. And then now you're watching the same battle in the breakaway.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Well, listen, you guys, when you come this way, especially Jackie, when she comes this way, have her stop by.
We will. We dang sure will.
Yeah.
We'll go hang out in the office over there at the H-Bar B in the morning.
Sounds good. We can do that. I got the key.
Charlie, here's a side note.
Yes.
When we, like I said, I'm grateful to have the years we rodeoed after, getting out of college and not getting a job, getting married and following the rodeo trail and having that life. And then I'm an accidental employee. I accidentally went to work and I just stayed there, which is good for us because, it made us keep our lifestyle and let Jerold keep his lifestyle. But sometimes he'd call me at work, and that was before cell phones, so he didn't call me on my cell phone. But the receptionist said, she's not at her desk. Do you want me to have her call you? Oh, yes, just call my office. And they really thought he had an office. They didn't know it was the H-Bar B. And it is a true story where he has his own key, goes down, opens up, makes coffee. So that he's not pulling your leg on.
I got to turn the TVs on. Got to turn the TVs on so we can watch the Cowboy Channel.
So. Yeah. And that place, man, you talk about there at Oakdale when the rodeo was over with, it was kind of like the Junior Bonner days. I remember that place got wild.
Yeah. You couldn't even get in there. Still can't.
Couldn't even get in there.
That's a good place to stay away from.
Well, it sounds like a great place to drink coffee.
Yeah, oh yeah. So, but anyway, well, thank you so much, Charlie. I appreciate it.
You bet. I appreciate it. It was an honor having you on.
All right. Take care.